devotionals. Those are the powers that you get for choosing a specific pantheon for your hero. What I'll talk about is the mechanics of what wasn't great, what through playtesting we realized was bad and wasn't working, why those didn't work, and the many, many, many changes we've made since then. There were a lot of things about the original devotionals that we loved. It was a lot of powers. Players had a lot of options, fit the culture very well. For the most part, they were mechanically sound and they worked really well and they were balanced amongst each other. So how it worked originally was we had 3 different types of powers for each devotional: ritual, theology, and divinity, and wrote up a lot of options for what would work for each of those for that culture. I put mechanics behind it and we went back and forth, but because of the way they were created and gave me a bunch of concepts and I turned all those concepts into powers, they didn't specifically meld really well together. What I mean by that is, and what a lot of players got stuck on, let's say Greek Power 1, one mechanic, and Greek Power 2 uses this other mechanic, and Greek Power 3 uses the first mechanic but only in certain situations, just no rhyme or reason. So it became very hard for players to remember what all their devotionals did. The second part that didn't work was, and this is probably the most egregious, times the powers would come up between each pantheon varied greatly. And that made some pantheons' powers seem better because they would come up every single game. Whereas other pantheons had really big powers that would come up rarely. So, yes, it was super cool when the Egyptian player did his power that took place when he used a saga labor. And his Ren symbol like spread out wherever they were, and he got like a bunch of bonuses during that episode, and it was super cool. That was really awesome for him. But over the course of a saga, he's only seeing that happen 3 or 4 times. Initially, we thought that wouldn't be a problem, that like the balance of the things and doing something rarely that was super cool would outweigh the doing something every game, but it just didn't work out that way. Just across many, many playtests. The people who didn't experience their pantheon all the time felt bad, and that sucks. I don't think maybe they didn't even consciously feel bad, but it's just like, didn't come up, and I hated it. Third problem, the choice of God, who was your patron, we realized didn't matter much. Felt like when we had 2 players from the same pantheon in a group, they were just very, very similar in their scope of powers. Thor and Odin, heroes, they would have similar healing, and other than their specific role play choices, we needed to find a way to make sure that 2 players that were playing the same pantheon felt very different because of their god choices, and that the god choice was just very important. That it wasn't a thing that you kind of threw away to get some stuff at the beginning and it was flavorful and role-playing based, but that there were actually mechanics behind it. Initially, I remember why we worked against that, because we didn't want Ares' hero to be pigeonholed into doing Ares stuff. And I think we've come up with some fantastic middle grounds where you can have a really cool hero of Ares who can do anything, but he always has a little bit of Ares in him, or her, or they. And you don't have to... I think the middle ground we found is really great, and I hope you like it. Problem 1, the Pantheon devotionals in general felt too mechanically different, and there's too much going on inside each devotional. So players still have a lot of choice. They can still choose how they're going around the devotional tree, but the powers are more based around similar mechanics. They all started with like a core mechanic and then branched off on ways that that player chooses to use that core mechanic and to grow that core mechanic. Second thing, these powers are happening more often. All the starter powers for players across every pantheon, the first one they start with will be something that happens to them almost every game, if not every game. Going to be much more part of their character. It's going to always be coming up, hopefully getting them used to the mechanic that they're going with, because that's going to be reflected throughout the rest of the devotionals. Last thing, the gods feeling bland and your god choice within a pantheon not seeming to matter. Huge change here. Your first power in devotional will come with a power specifically for your god. Later, towards the end of Mortal, a second power that's not tied directly to the devotional really lets that shows that god's power in like an amazing way. All right, so now we'll go over the new devotionals. We'll go over each pantheon and then a god from that pantheon. We'll go over just the first devotional and the first god power. The second god powers are purposefully a little more complicated, and so we'll start with Norse. They're heading towards their fate. They want to get the most amazing, awesome end fate as they can, and so they're just like bulldozing towards those. And they start with their first power, making sure they live to reach their fate, right? Like their whole cosmology doesn't work if they're dying before they're fated to die. So every time the Norse heroes spending a chapter labor or a divinity, they are healing their archetype dots and fatigues. And then we have the Thor power. Right now, this hero has nothing to spend divinity on. So how are we going to get that second part of their first power to work? Well, the Thor power is going to come in and help. So the first thing is the Thor power. Whenever the hero spends a chapter labor, in addition to the healing, they're going to also gain 1 brawn. So they're going to get the power to activate their strength a little more often. And then they can spend a divinity whenever they want to get their archetype dots and brawn. So again, 2 to 4 at mortal. So, and then when they spend that divinity, of course, from the first power, there'll also be healing. So the Thor hero is going to be healing as they get stronger, and then they can choose to get stronger to heal. Just like next, we'll talk about Egypt. Egypt's concepts are going to be about making important relationships, and working with those people, eventually molding together. Divine-wise, if you're thinking, if you think about it, there's Atum and Ra, and then Atum Ra. And he has the eyes of Ra, which may take some of his power, and they're all about combining and working together and kind of shaping so they can more appropriately get done what needs to get done. So Egyptian hero is going to start out by picking someone in the group they have a relationship with and partnering with them. When they partner with them, they pick one of their friends, the Egyptian hero pick one of their friends' blessings that uses a chapter labor. And then the Egyptian hero gets to add that to the labors that they have. And when they spend it, the blessings they have, and when they spend it, they use their friend's role. So if we're going to, if everybody's getting really sick, I can borrow my friend, even if I have no energy, I can borrow my friend's energy blessing and heal as though they were healing. But I'm able to do it because we're sharing. And during lull, instead of resting, if I want to switch around either the power I'm borrowing or the person I'm friends with that I'm borrowing stuff from, I can do that by spending 1 divinity. So then let's talk about Isis and what her power does. Whenever you or your partner, when you're in the same episode, you both gain a bonus to both stamina and determination just all the time. So Isis protects over her people, and so their hero puts a little protection over the person that they've sort of attached to. So they're going to be less likely to get influenced by mind powers or mind controlled or doing things they don't want to do, and they're going to be a little healthier versus poison, exhausted from the heat or smoke inhalation, all that kind of stuff. Now I'll go to Hindu. The basic concept is that they're good at everything. Better than normal people are good at everything, because they're sort of part of the universe, and there is a part of them that is good. And how we're going to mechanize that is that their strives are just universally better than every other pantheon. If you'll remember, strive is if you don't feel like you have good enough dots in a specific talent, you can spend an episode labor and roll a set roll. For most people, it's 5 dice with 3 automatic successes. Hindu players, on the other hand, there's no roll. If they want to strive at something based on their archetype dots, they just get a certain amount of successes. 1, you'll risk rolling poorly, and 2, you always know what you're going to get. And as you go up archetype, so it starts at 6 successes, and then in archetype 3 it's 7, and then it's 8. You just continually get better at doing the stuff you theoretically are bad at. Whereas normally, as archetypes could go up, they become less and less important because the role stays the same. So for most players, striving stops being as useful around archetype 3 or 4. But for a Hindu hero, it's going to always be useful. They're going to always be good at these other things. Parvati. They have an aspect and a domain that they can do for themselves or for other players. Instead of that person rolling, before they roll, they can give them automatic successes. Remember, the mechanic behind the Hindu is they're not rolling, they're just good at stuff. So if, for example, it might be a very important roll and you want to make sure you succeed or make sure your friend succeeds, or if they're terrible at it and you want to make sure they succeed, either by begging the god to do it for them or by having the god do it through you. So for Parvati specifically, the aspect in the domain she's going to get special kind of purview over are lover and elemental. So while she could, for herself, not strive, let's say they had no lover. If you were a Parvati hero but you had no lover, instead of striving for it, you could spend a divinity and you would get 8 successes over the 6. The numbers will be here probably, and that'll help out this. So for lover, and if your friend was really bad at lover, and let's say they wanted to do how to do a persuasion roll, and they're not good at it, they could strive and get a decent roll, or you could ask Parvati, pray to Parvati, help them, and through them, they would just automatically get an 8. The Greeks are similar to their old version. We wanted to highlight perfection and specialization. Didn't like just the set bonus to those things. And so instead, we decided to bring in exploding dice. Exploding dice are in a bunch of games. The concept is if you roll the top number on the dice, a 10 in our game, that you get to pick up that dice and re-roll. So after your roll, they got 2 10s, you get to pick up those 2 dice, you count the 2 successes per dice, then you get to re-roll those and maybe get some more successes. You pick 2 talents that you're going to have this power attached to, and for those 2 talents, they can be wherever you want, your 10s explode. So no one else has access to this, and you're just like, oh, boom, 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 look at all these successes I got. Successes, the extra 10s don't count towards triumphing. Instead of just an automatic, Greeks are better at these stats successes. You have much bigger highs and much bigger lows. You can get a bunch of 10s and re-roll them and get a bunch more successes, or you can get a bunch of 10s and re-roll them and get nothing, or you can get not like a bunch of 9s and it's still a great roll, but it's not actually using your thing. The god powers associated with this are, in addition to the 2 you pick, the god you pick gives you 2 automatically. So the god's going to give you 2 talents that you're going to have automatically explode 10s on. So you'll get to pick 2, and the god will give you 2. So you're going to have a total of 4 across the 21 talents. 4 of them for you are going to explode, and you get to choose where half of those are. So if we pick Dionysus, for example, he's going to give you disguise, one of the things he's excellent at, and cosmology, one of the new talents that I don't think we've talked about, but that's for another day. If maybe you decide not to take any disguise at all, even though you're with Dionysus. Although the power is often useless because it's not a thing you're rolling all the time. Sometimes you're going to want to strive. And when you strive for that thing, those 10s still explode, so it's still going to give you some alternate value, even if it's not the main thing. In addition, there's got to be a way to spend a divinity. And for the god-specific powers, they can spend a divinity to add dice equal to the archetype dots to those rolls. And that's even if it's a strive. So like we talked about before. So let's go over cosmology disguise again. Let's say you maxed out cosmology and you have 0 in disguise. You at archetype 2. I can spend a divinity, and I'm rolling 2 extra dice. Like I have a whole extra dot of cosmology. Well, not quite. I'm rolling 2 extra dice on my cosmology roll. And any of those 10s will roll into more. Well, I will get to explode them. My disguise roll, whenever I strive, if I wanted, I can spend a divinity to also add 2 dice. So instead of my strive being just 5 with 3 successes, it could be 7 with 3 successes. A really good roll, because Dionysus is, being the hero of Dionysus is helpful. So thanks for watching. Hopefully there wasn't too much hand waving, and hopefully the edit makes it not too choppy, as this took hours to get what I assume is a 20-minute video. If you have any questions or comments that are related to the stuff in the video, please send them, or something you'd like me to do another video on. Be happy to do that, but try to be specific. Try to make these as small as possible, even though this was probably huge. And unfortunately, videos like, when will you be done? I don't know. I'm working as hard as I can. So yeah, thank you very much, and goodbye.